I tried to keep my tone even, my patience intact. "Stella, I just need you to be respectful, that's all I'm asking." She rolled her eyes, stabbing at her food with her fork. "Why do you even care? You're not my dad, you never will be." The words stung, but I was used to them by now. Lately, Stella had been growing more distant, more hostile. It wasn't always like this. When Delilah and I first got married, Stella had been cautious, but open. We built something, not perfect, but something that felt real. Now it was like every effort I made was met with a wall of resentment. "That's not what this is about," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about respect. For me, for your mom, for this house." She let out a bitter laugh. "If you really cared about respect, you'd leave us alone." That's when Delilah, my wife, the woman I had supported, loved, and built a life with, spoke. "Maybe she's right, Ethan." Her voice was quieter, but the weight of it crushed me. "Maybe we'd all be better off without you." The room went silent. My grip on my fork tightened before I set it down, hands trembling. My chest felt hollow. I looked at Delilah, searching for something, regret, hesitation, anything that would tell me she didn't mean it. But all I saw was exhaustion, defeat, and maybe something worse, indifference. Stella sat back, arms crossed, satisfied, like she had finally won some invisible battle. I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded once and pushed my chair back. "All right," I said, my voice eerily calm, "if that's what you want." I stood up, walked to the door, grabbed my coat. No one stopped me. No one called after me. As I stepped outside into the cold night, a strange sense of relief settled in my chest. Maybe they were right. Maybe leaving was exactly what I needed to do. The night air was crisp, biting at my skin as I walked aimlessly down the quiet streets. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from that house, away from Delilah's indifference, away from Stella's hatred. Eventually, my feet carried me to the one place that felt safe. Elliot opened the door, brows furrowing the moment he saw me. "Jesus, man, you look like hell." I let out a breathless laugh. "That bad? Come in." Elliot had been my best friend since college, the one person I knew I could rely on without question. He didn't ask anything right away, just handed me a beer and sat with me in silence. I appreciated that. Hours passed, and eventually I broke. I told him everything, how Stella had changed, how Delilah didn't even try to defend me, how I just walked out and no one stopped me. Elliot leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Damn, man, that's rough, but you know what? Maybe it's for the best." I stared at him. "For the best?" He shrugged. "Think about it. You've been killing yourself trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect stepdad. And what do you get? Nothing. Maybe it's time you stop chasing something that's not there." His words settled into my chest like a slow burn. Was I really chasing something that was never there to begin with? My phone buzzed on the table, then again, and again. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Delilah. I picked up the phone, staring at the screen as the missed call count climbed. Then a message popped up. "Where are you?" I locked the screen and set the phone down. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the silence. For once, I wasn't going to be the one chasing. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. Another call, another message. "Ethan, please, we need to talk." I ignored it. Instead, I focused on the one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Why had Stella changed so suddenly? A few months ago, she wasn't like this. She wasn't warm, but she wasn't cruel either. We had a rhythm, a silent understanding. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. Then, out of nowhere, it was like she had flipped a switch. I grabbed my phone, but not to answer Delilah. Instead, I searched through social media, through posts, through anything that might give me a clue. And then I saw it. A picture posted by Stella's friend, a group of them at a cafe. And sitting next to her, his arm draped casually over the back of her chair, was a man I hadn't seen in years. Miles, the ex, the father. I sat up, my heart pounding. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Stella's change in attitude, Delilah's exhaustion, the sudden hostility. It all lined up too perfectly. Miles was back, and somehow I had a feeling he was right in the middle of everything. I couldn't just sit there. I needed to know more. Elliot was still asleep, but I grabbed my keys and headed out, my mind racing. I had no doubt that Miles had something to do with Stella's behavior, but what exactly had he been telling her? I drove to a small diner near Stella's school, the kind of place teenagers hung out after class. If Miles was trying to work his way back into her life, he'd want to be seen, to make his presence known. I didn't have to wait long. Through the diner window, I spotted them. Miles leaned back in the booth, talking animatedly while Stella listened, hanging onto every word. She looked hopeful. I stepped closer, just enough to hear snippets of the conversation. "Doesn't understand you like I do, Stell. He's not family." Stella frowned. I don't know. Mom really likes him." Miles laughed, shaking his head. "Your mom settled, sweetheart. She was heartbroken, lonely. But that guy? He's not your real family. You and me, we are." I clenched my fists. Then came the real gut punch. "Forget college," Miles continued, his voice smooth, persuasive. "I have something better for you. A real opportunity. We could start something together. A family business. You don't need to waste years of your life in some classroom when you could be out there making real money building something with me." I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't just manipulating her emotions. He was trying to control her future. And Stella, desperate for a connection, for approval, was buying into it. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about me anymore. Miles was dangerous, and I needed to stop him before it was too late. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to the house, my mind racing with everything I had just heard. Delilah needed to know. She needed to understand what Miles was doing before it was too late. When she opened the door, her eyes were tired, her expression guarded. "Ethan." I pushed past her into the living room. "We need to talk," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "I've been trying to call you. Miles is back." That got her attention, her body tensed, her expression shifting. "What?" "I saw him, with Stella. He's been feeding her lies, making her think I'm the enemy. And it's worse than that. He's convincing her to give up college to invest in some business with him." Delilah's face paled. She sank onto the couch, shaking her head. "No. He wouldn't. He would." I sat down across from her, leaning forward. "Delilah, you know who he is. You know what he's done. He took advantage of you before. Now he's doing the same thing to Stella." She swallowed hard, her hands gripping her knees. "I should have seen this coming." I exhaled, my voice softer now. "It's not too late, but we have to act now." She looked up at me, guilt and regret in her eyes. "Ethan, I'm so sorry for everything. I should have stood up for you. I should have never let it get this far." For the first time in days, I saw the woman I fell in love with, not the exhausted, distant version of her, but the real Delilah. I nodded. "We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to save Stella." Delilah wiped at her face and straightened her shoulders. "What do we do?" I already had a plan forming. First, we find out exactly what Miles is up to, and then we take him down. I wasn't going to let Miles manipulate Stella any further. If he was running another scam, I needed proof. Delilah and I spent the next few days piecing together everything we could about Miles. She reached out to old friends, people who had known him when they were together. I called in a favor from an acquaintance who worked in finance. The picture that emerged was exactly what I expected. Miles hadn't changed. He had a pattern. He'd show up, charm his way into people's lives, dangle the promise of wealth, and then disappear once he drained them of everything. He had already done it to Delilah years ago, and now he was setting Stella up as his next victim. But the real breakthrough came when I found out about the dinner. Miles was hosting a private gathering at an upscale restaurant, inviting families of Stella's friends, pitching his new business opportunity. It was the perfect setup for his scam. Convince parents to invest in a promising new venture, all while using their kids as leverage. This was our chance. I reached out to someone who could make a real difference, a federal investigator who had been tracking financial fraud cases. When I laid out everything we knew, she agreed to help. All we needed was for Miles to make his move. Delilah hesitated when I told her the plan. What about Stella? She's going to be devastated. I nodded. I know. But it's better she sees the truth now than after he's taken everything from her. She looked down, twisting her wedding ring. I hate that it's come to this. Me too, I admitted. But we don't have a choice. We had one shot to expose Miles for what he really was, and we were going to take it. The restaurant was packed, the air filled with quiet conversations and clinking glasses. Miles sat at the head of a long table, flashing his signature charming smile as he spoke to the group. Stella sat close to him, nodding along, her expression filled with admiration. Delilah and I had arrived separately, blending into the background, unnoticed. Across the room, the investigator we had contacted sat at the bar, casually observing. Everything was set. Miles leaned forward, his voice smooth and persuasive. This isn't just an investment. This is a future, a way to secure real financial independence for your kids. I'm offering you something solid, something that will set them up for life. I could see the parents listening, some nodding, some skeptical but intrigued. He was good, too good. Then he pulled out a sleek binder, filled with fake projections and fabricated numbers. I've already got investors lined up. The first round of funding is almost closed, but I wanted to give you all a chance to be part of this before it's too late. This was it. I stepped forward. Funny, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That's exactly what you told Delilah years ago, right before you took her money and ran. A hush fell over the table. Stella turned to me, her face tightening. Ethan, what are you doing? Miles didn't miss a beat. He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Well, I was wondering when you'd show up. I ignored him and pulled out a folder of my own. You recognize these names, Miles? They're all people you've scammed before. People who thought they were investing in their future, just like you're trying to do now. The parents started murmuring, flipping through the documents I handed out. Faces paled. Miles's jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. This is ridiculous. He's just bitter because he's never been part of this family. Delilah stood then. No, Miles, he's telling the truth. And then, as if on cue, the investigator walked over, flashing her badge. Miles Carter, you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and financial misconduct. Stella's breath hitched. Dad? Miles barely had time to react before officers appeared, placing him in handcuffs. His face twisted in rage as he looked at me. You think you won, Ethan? I met his glare. No, I just made sure you lost. As they took him away, Stella sat frozen, staring at the empty seat where her father had been. The illusion was shattered, and now she had to face the truth. The ride home was silent. Stella sat in the back seat, arms wrapped around herself, staring out the window. Delilah kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, but neither of us spoke. When we got home, Stella went straight to her room. The door closed softly behind her. No slamming, no angry outburst, just silence. Delilah let out a long breath, rubbing her face. She's in shock. I nodded, leaning against the kitchen counter. She worshipped him. And now, she knows the truth. For years, Miles had been this perfect absent figure in her mind, someone she could dream about, someone she could compare me to. And now she had to face the fact that the man she defended, the man she pushed me away for, was nothing more than a con artist. An hour passed before her door finally creaked open. She walked into the kitchen, eyes red but dry. She looked at me, hesitation flickering across her face. I was awful to you, she said, her voice small. I didn't say anything. This wasn't the moment for me to make it easier on her. She swallowed. I thought you were the one ruining things. I thought you were trying to replace him, trying to take something from me. But you weren't. You never were. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. I let him get into my head. I believed everything he said. I was so stupid. I shook my head. You weren't stupid, Stella. You just wanted to believe in him. Her lower lip trembled. I hurt you. You did, I admitted, but I know why. She sniffled, nodding before looking at the ground. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it. I sighed. pushing off the counter. Stella, it's not about deserving. It's about moving forward. She finally met my gaze, searching for something. Is that even possible? I thought about it for a moment before answering. Yeah, I said, but it's gonna take time. She nodded again, then quietly walked back to her room. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like we weren't completely lost. The next morning, the house felt different, quieter. Not the tense, suffocating silence of before, but something else, something softer. Delilah poured herself a cup of coffee, then hesitated before pouring another and sliding it across the counter to me. A peace offering. I took it without a word. I don't want to lose you, she said, staring into her cup. I let out a slow breath. I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. Her eyes met mine, filled with regret. You are wanted, Ethan. I was just, I don't know, afraid? Exhausted? I let Miles' return mess with my head, and I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I nodded, absorbing her words. Things have to change, Delilah. I can't be the only one fighting for this family. You won't be, she promised. It was a start. Stella appeared in the doorway then, lingering like she wasn't sure she was allowed in the same space as me. Hey, I replied, keeping my voice even. She shifted on her feet. Mom told me you're staying. For now, I said carefully, but things have to be different. I know. She hesitated. I want that too. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something. Delilah reached for her keys. I have some errands to run. You two okay here? Stella and I exchanged a glance. There was a brief moment of awkwardness before she shrugged. Yeah, we're good. Delilah gave me a soft look before heading out, leaving us alone. Stella lingered for a second, then cleared her throat. I was thinking about going for ice cream later. You know, if you wanted to come. I studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Yeah, I'd like that. She didn't smile, but some of the tension in her shoulders eased. And just like that, we took the first step towards something new. The ice cream shop wasn't anything special, just a small place Stella and I used to go to before things got complicated. Back then, it had been our thing. A quiet routine that didn't need words. Now sitting across from her, it felt like a bridge between who we were and who we could be. Stella stirred her melted ice cream with her spoon, not quite meeting my eyes. So, this is weird, right? I smirked. A little. She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. I still don't know how I let him mess with me like that. How I was so blind. You wanted to believe in him, I said simply. It's not a crime to want your dad to be someone better than he is. She finally met my gaze. I think part of me always knew, but it was easier to blame you. You were here. He wasn't. And I was so desperate for him to love me the way I thought he should. I nodded, letting her process it on her own terms. After a moment, she sighed. I don't expect everything to just go back to normal. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. You did, I admitted. But this, I gestured between us. This is a start. She chewed on her lip, then, almost hesitantly, pushed her ice cream toward me. I don't know if you still like this flavor, but if you want some. It was a small thing, barely anything at all, but I knew what it meant. I took the spoon from her, scooping a bite. Still good. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. A real one. As we sat there, I thought about everything that had happened, the way I walked away, the way I let them feel my absence. Sometimes the best way to help isn't by forcing yourself into someone's life. It's by stepping back and letting the truth reveal itself. Maybe leaving that night had been the best decision I ever made. Or maybe I should have fought harder. What do you think? Was I wrong for walking away?